Yeah, so am I. So am I. It's been great being in romance, but it's also great leaving. What is it? I hate it when you leave, but I love to watch you go, romance.
It's better to love and lost and never loved at all. Yeah, yeah.
That's a great one. That's very deep, but mine was just about looking at people's butts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I hate it when you leave, but I love to watch you go.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Pleasure of the Text podcast, a shared management space where readers and writers make meaning together. We're your hosts, Shannon and Gareth.
Good morning, Shannon. How are you going?
I'm going really well today, and I'm excited because it's the day. It's finally arrived. It's our book off between our romance books. I think we've just made a new slur. Book off.
Book off. Yes. We both read romance novels, two different romance novels, and so we can interrogate each other. Oh, yes, I have mine here. So I read and will be reviewing Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola. And you've got Book Lovers? I
read Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Yes.
Okay. Who wants to go first? Should I start us off?
Yeah, jump right in.
All right. So, as you know, writing a synopsis is an enormous chore. And because these conversations are a thing of pleasure for me, I've just stolen the synopsis from Kirkus Reviews. So thank you, Kirkus Reviews. Great place to go for synopses. So here's the synopsis of Honey and Spice. In a nutshell, a Black British university student explores love and friendship on her radio show in this shining romance debut. All right, long form. Lona Kikiola Kiki Banjo is perfectly content with her Switzerland-esque social status at Whitewell College. Uninterested in making any political or social waves, Kiki dedicates all her energy to Brown Sugar, her show on the college radio station. Her college, called Blackwell by the school's Black Caucus, is home to a number of cliques and queen bees, but Kiki prefers to stay behind the mic when dealing with any drama between Blackwellian babes and the guys she dubs waste men. Quote, they waste our time, waste our energy. Armed with a sharp tongue and her producer best friend demeanor, Kiki hopes the show will land her a spot at New York University's elite summer pop media program, but she needs a community component to really seal the deal. Enter hot transfer Malachi Karedi, a film student and fresh manna from heaven. Despite his recent arrival, his more than good looks and charisma have already pitted the independent Blackwell women against each other, and even Kiki finds it difficult to withstand his effortless charm. After an impromptu makeout session spurs their unexpected friendship, Kiki and Malachi decide to combine forces and fake date to add to the credibility of Brown Sugar and provide audio for his romance documentary. Suddenly, the walls Kiki built around herself come tumbling down as her relationship with Malachi turns them into local celebrities, and she must come to terms with what it means to step out from the recording booth and actually be seen. Babalola's debut novel is lyrical and sincere, her prose rhythmic. Quote, my smile had had enough of being trapped and spilled out, wide and brazen and messy, dripping everywhere. It soaked through my clothes and into my skin. Kiki is the epitome of cool. Her dialogue oozes with confidence, and her biting wit rolls off her tongue with ease, leaving readers wishing they could play her clever disses on repeat like their favorite song. So that pretty much...
Yeah.
No, please.
So, dating Malachi makes her a celebrity?
Yes, because it is very cliquey. And essentially, he's the good-looking guy in town. And so it's a big deal. But then also they do a segment on her show where couples talk about being couples. And in a sense, they're a power couple. And so, yeah, she's a celebrity within the Blackwellian community. The notion of celebrity is very understated, I have to say.
Yeah.
it's not a major factor in the story, but it is interesting because she's trying to build credibility by faking a relationship. And that's just an interesting way to be credible, in my view. What's interesting about that too is Brown Sugar, her radio show, is where she gives dating advice to people, but she doesn't date. She does have her guy, Zach, who is, pretty much from the start, he's a kind of a pantomime villain. He's very one note. He's just a bad guy. And for some reason, she sees him for, I believe.
But he's her guy, even though he's a bad guy.
Yeah, but it's all on the down low. He wants people to know they're together, probably, but she doesn't. And they're together, I think, 9 months. And that's interesting because he's such an obviously bad guy. And then we find out, and she doesn't have a lot of respect for him. In fact, her descriptions of him are quite brutal. But nevertheless, she hooks up with him for a very extended period of time. And it's not a dating situation, but she's giving this dating advice, and her dating experience is virtually nil as far as I can tell.
Yeah, so she's definitely not qualified.
No, it's quite weird. I mean, she talks about people not being sincere and wasting people's time, but then she creates this fake relationship, drawing people in and not being real and wasting their time. So that's, there's a sort of that's somewhat troubling. I found that, it's a long book. It's over 400 pages, and it could have been shorter, most certainly. As a sort of a point of process, I always read other people's reviews. And this book gets rave reviews from virtually everyone, like 5 stars across the board. So, and I want to note that because I think, it's important. Your reading is your reading. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that my reading is lesser in some way than everyone else's. But I think it's worth noting that I am one of the outlier reader reviewers who did not think this was a great book. I'm going to talk about where I think it's problematic, and then I want to talk about where I think it's strong.
Yeah.
So the review that most clearly mirrors mine is the Guardian review. I'm just going to read you a little bit of that. So, quote, Kiki makes for an entertaining narrator, and the novel's countless witty lines come mainly from her inner monologue. As the book opens, she's fleeing after a one-night stand with a fellow student who fancies himself as the campus Casanova, but whose, quote, 50-thread count sheet scratched against my calves. I should note that there is a mention that they've been hooking up for a while, so it's not really a one-night stand. He embraces her cheesily in front of a mirror, quote, it only took a few seconds for his eyes to flit from me, from us, to his own reflection. His bottom lip had tucked in. It was honestly like a very uncomfortable threesome where two people were way more into each other than they were you. And that's a really great example of her snappy inner monologue.
Yeah.
And, I love that. I think that's brilliantly written. Continuing with the review, immediately after this, Kiki meets Malachi and the real engine of the novel starts up. The story often drifts into a heavily Americanized snap and sass sitcom register, which sits oddly with its UK red brick university setting, while the general descriptions, reported actions, and exchanges between characters can be strained and clunky. However, the central couple have a beguiling sweetness, and Babalola skillfully imbues their scenes with a tender innocence that is romantic. So I think that's a very fair overview of what's happening. The wit in the book is all in the inner monologue.
Yeah.
And Kiki almost seems to be a different person to the narrator Kiki. The one that actually speaks in dialogue is a far less interesting character than the character from her inner monologue. And that is, plausible. People can be, I think, perhaps more entertaining internally than they choose to be out in the world. But there does seem to be this disconnect, which I found difficult to deal with. You would swear it was set in an American university, and often I found myself forgetting that Whitewell College is actually in the UK. That seems to change over time. There's a lot more British slang that seems to fall into the novel as it unfolds, but certainly early on, these characters are all beautiful. It's very cliquey. There are people walking around in togas. It has a very American kind of
that's very American
vibe
with the red cups.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And the settings are perhaps not that well drawn at times, the sense of place. And also, no one ever seems to go to class. The characters seem a bit young. Obviously, I'm somewhat removed from my university days, but nevertheless, they do read rather more like high school students. And I've noticed that was something that a number of critics have sort of said, I think this book maybe isn't for me, or I'm too old for it, because they feel like high school students. And I think actually, clearly this book is not written for me. I'm not a romance reader as such. So, that has to be acknowledged. But nevertheless, it really doesn't matter. You can read kids' books and be drawn in by the characters. I think the book deals really well with the issue of race on campuses. And I really felt it gave me an insight into what it would be like to be part of a minority. Because, at university, so I went to art school and I was popular there. And then I went to
and then you left
a regular
and you
university. And I wasn't. It was. So I went to being sort of popular to being a loner, really. I don't think I've ever been part of a minority. And that is a really different dynamic. So those bits were really interesting to me. But I think the novel, the real struggle within the novel is that there are familiar tropes. The fake relationship is a familiar trope. The novel follows a predictable course from two characters who don't really get on, get to know each other, fall in love, have an incident, and then reconcile at the end. So I suppose I should be chucking in a spoiler alert right now, but honestly, modern romance, do they not all follow that pattern? So I'm not sure there's an issue with me saying any of that.
Yeah.
The issue that I have with the novel, the thing that really breaks the novel down for me, is that I never quite managed to be pulling for Kiki. She starts out as a fairly obnoxious character. She is extremely superior, which I didn't mind, actually. I think, it can be quite funny. And a lot of these zingers about Zach, her guy that she's seeing on the side, are really quite funny. And, I'm sort of happy for her to be a terrible character.
Yeah.
And she does soften as the book unfolds. And there is a particular moment when Malachi, her love interest, has a run-in with his father, and she really sees him. There's a empathy in those scenes and the way she deals with him, that at that point, and that's actually sort of the point where they really fall in love, I kind of fell in love a bit with Kiki at that point. I was like, yeah, okay, I see it now. This is in her. Great. However, it never comes back. That's it. That was her crowning moment. And the point of conflict between them feels incredibly contrived. Babalola puts a lot of work into trying to dance around that by having Kiki fighting with herself as she's really laying into Malachi for no apparent reason. But it's difficult to reconcile with the characters and the shape of the novel. I think those two things actually clash quite badly. there's a little bit. I just want to read you one tiny bit. Early on in the novel, she goes to see Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller's kind of like her mentor. So I'll just read you this little bit. Dr. Miller raised a brow. Kiki, when you're put in a group, you don't give space for other people's ideas. This is when Dr. Miller's saying you should work with Malachi. She doesn't suggest they fake a relationship, but just that they work together. Kiki leaves no space for others' ideas. And that sums up the character of Kiki exactly. With that scene with Malachi and his father, Malachi's voice, even though he's not the one speaking, suddenly is there. Like Malachi's voice in Kiki, the empathy is there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen anywhere else, and it's really odd. And I do think that the problem that Babalola is struggling with is the trying to stick to these tropes and trying to stick to a very rigid format, whilst also trying to expand beyond it. And I don't think she's entirely successful. And a really good example of this for me is the character of Amina. Amina is her best friend. And every now and again, Amina will reveal something about herself that I, as a reader, already understood about her. And Kiki is stunned. She's like, is that right? Oh, I didn't see that. And I find that bizarre because she's supposed to be very clever, very intuitive. And yeah, I mean, and on certain levels she is, but clearly, like with this best friend who she really cares about, she doesn't seem to know her at all. And I find that very strange. The thing that makes Kiki damaged to begin with is an incident where her best friend at school, Rian, has a boyfriend called Niall. Niall takes Kiki to a party. Kiki's mother has cancer, and so the idea is he's just showing her a good time. But he isn't. He's a terrible guy, and he gets her drunk, and he makes a pass at her and tries to get her to have sex with him. She's not into it, or she's a little bit into it for a moment and then thinks, what am I doing? Pushes him off, runs out. He then goes to Rian, her best friend, and says, Kiki jumped my bones. What a terrible person. And her whole friend group block her on their phones, and she becomes an outcast. So in the middle of the novel, Rian gets in touch with her and basically contrives a way to meet with her and says, I'm sorry. This guy was messing me up. He was controlling me. He was lying to me. Essentially, he was an abusive boyfriend. He was a predator. And Amina, once Rian comes onto the scene, says, well, I guess you're going to be best friends with her now. And Kiki assures her that cannot be the case, that they have bonded and that's what it is. And I think this is a terrible bit of the book because, Rian is a real victim in this situation and was obviously a victim really from the point when Kiki got pushed away from her friendship group. She would have been aware that this guy was trying to control her best friend. Instead of fighting for her best friend, trying to protect her best friend, she just goes away. And it's really all about her. Now, I recognize that she was going through other things, and so you can kind of allow for that. But when Rian gets back in touch with her and all is forgiven, it's like a passing thought. And you would think that there would be a lot more complexity to this for Kiki. As a person in the world who loves people and has human connections, it seemed bizarre to me that this is just a brush-off moment.
Yeah.
And there is that trope in romance, the triangle, the love triangle. Now, one thing this book does beautifully is present female relationships, female friendships, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. How on earth did that trope not become a central figure in this book? That in a sense, Kiki has to somehow reconcile her friendship with both Rian and Amina. Two besties. You can't have two besties. How does that work? And I actually think that should have been the complication that pushes Malachi away. I think her involvement with that could have been the thing that pushed him away. It would have been far more organic, far more in terms of the characters' narrative arcs. It would have made far more sense. But I think Babalola kind of set up a structure, and she's a very good writer. And she tries so hard to write her way through that structure, but I just don't think she nails it. Nevertheless, it is a very well written book in terms of the inner monologue. Like full stars for that. I think the Babalola is a really engaging writer. I think she'd be an amazing op-ed kind of writer. Cultural criticism and so forth. And I believe she does some of that, and it really shows. The dialogue is clunky at times, particularly the dialogue attribution. A lot of smiling, smirking, winking, glinting eyes. There's a lot of an attempt to control how the reader sees the interactions unfold. And there's a lot of them, and they're quite slow. So that aspect is not so great. But the sex scenes are, well, there's not really a sex scenes. There's a bit of a sex scene. They are very well written. And as you know, Shannon, it's not easy to write a sex scene. We found that out last week. And the first kiss is beautifully written. And in a sense, they have a second first kiss, and that is also beautifully written. So I think that my sense is Babalola has written another book called Love in Colour, and those are short stories. And I think that would probably play to her strengths at this point in her writing journey. I suspect I'd really like Love in Colour because where the book falls down really is in this larger narrative structure.
Yeah.
I think it's a commendable effort to try to work with very rigid tropes, but I reckon it's also maybe a bit of a missed opportunity. So I'm giving this one 3 stars.
And we had this discussion before because obviously we don't read romance genre. Is it 3 stars within romance, or is it 3 stars in just a general book that you pick up?
Yeah, so it's the latter. I think it is possible, and you see this in sci-fi and horror and crime. They are perhaps, I mean, they have a lot of tropes, but there is a lot more flexibility in those genres. Somebody needs to take the romance genre and push it more. These tropes are, I think, suffocating what could be great works. And you want a happy ending, probably, if it's a romantic comedy, which I guess this is.
I just noticed
romantic
that your name is
not,
Grumps.
Not necessarily. Yeah, I put my name down as Grumps because I thought everyone loves this book, and here I am, just an old white guy going,
You sound like it now.
Yeah, I'm a real pain in the butt. But I mean, the thing is, it would be really disrespectful, I think, to say for a romance novel, this is a great book.
Yeah.
And I think Babalola deserves more respect than that. So I'm not going to say that. And as a reader, I tend to be able to engage with books if they're well written. And this one is, for the most part, well written, but I think it has a fatal flaw. For me, it did. In that I just never really cared if Kiki and Malachi got together. There were points where I was trying to care. And, I liked Malachi, but Malachi is a fantasy. Not because he's a decent human being, which he is, but there are just too many things he does that belie what he says about himself. He's structured to accommodate Kiki, and so is Amina. Amina gets angry at Kiki when Kiki needs someone to get angry at her, as opposed to all the other times when she probably should have. The people who are against Kiki at the beginning are not really against her, and they go out of their way to prove this to her, and then she's good with them.
Yeah.
So, as a character, she's very guarded, she's very judgmental, and very blind to her own weaknesses. So, those are hard characters to root for. And in a book where you didn't have to root for them, it wouldn't be a problem. But in this book, I think it is.
Yeah, I agree because I also tried to read Honey and Spice so we can have, two perspectives. And I don't think I can get past the third chapter just because Kiki's character is just so, can I say unlovable? It's really hard to engage in her space within the novel.
It is. And clearly, the idea is that she warms up, and she does warm up. And there is that high point with Malachi. But here again, you get into this problem where, so she has some trauma, and I've touched on it with her mother, getting cancer, and this horrible Niall guy who, tries to force a sexual liaison with her. Those are not small things, but it sort of, her character is so difficult to like. I kind of thought when the scene with Niall was happening, I got really worried that it was going to be a lot worse than it turned out to be. And I was really glad that she got away without it being really bad.
Yeah.
And absolutely it couldn't have been really bad, right? Because this wouldn't be a rom-com anymore. It just wouldn't work. But her character feels more damaged than someone who's had these experiences should be, by my estimation. I just found it hard to believe. And likewise with Malachi, the damage he seems to have suffered from his father's hypocrisy. His father's a hypocrite. He seems so damaged by it. And yet he happily becomes a hypocrite himself to get what he wants by setting up this fake relationship. And I really, and they're clearly falling in love, but apparently neither of them are sure that's happening. And again, these are things that are supposed to happen in romance books, but that's not the way it's working on the page. And so you're sort of being told it's this other thing that you're not seeing. And to a large extent, you're being asked to believe that you're a heck of a lot smarter and more perceptive than the characters are.
Yeah.
And, I know myself, I'm not that smart and perceptive. So I sort of think, So yeah, for me, it just doesn't hold up. And I think she missed that great friendship trope, because if that had been the central complication, that would have been very romantic. It wouldn't have negated her relationship with Malachi. I think it would have highlighted it. And I think that could have been really amazing. I think that would have been an incredible way for her to have gone.
Yeah. From what you're telling me, it does sound like it's a book for children or young adults, because the scene where...
Yeah, young adults.
Yeah, because the scene where the party where she gets hit on, or a pass made at her by, what was the character's name?
Niall. The guy who, yeah.
Yeah. So she gets hit on by Niall, and, I'm a woman, I've been to parties and that shit's happened to me before. And, parents or grandparents or uncles and aunts having cancer, these are normal adult things that we deal with. And instead of handling it head on and talking to a friend about it, she's just left. That's very high school immature. And then when Rianne and her other friend Amina are coming into the picture, and it's like, well, am I your best friend now, or is she your best friend? It seems to be this, immature seems to be the right word for it. What you've told me.
Yeah, a lot of the reviews mention that it seems to be aimed at a young adult audience, and so in a sense, if that's the case, I suppose it does make sense that the characters perhaps behave a little more youthfully than they probably should at the age they are.
And how old are they?
But having
the
said
characters?
That, Kiki is in her second year of university, so 19, 20.
Okay, so that is quite young.
Something like that.
I would say that's young adult-ish. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly it felt a lot more like a high school thing than a uni thing to me. And I do think that moving out of home, the British have this thing where you go away to uni, which I think is a great thing. I feel it does age you a bit quicker. I think, if anything, Australian students would be more likely to be a bit immature. And And I'm quite certain I wasn't hanging out with a particularly mature crowd when I was at university. They wouldn't have had me. So, yeah, I mean, it felt young to me. And a lot of the other reviewers seemed to think that it was very much a young adult novel aimed at that audience, which, is fine. But again, the reality of the characters and the intentions and the structures and the tropes all just seem to grate on each other.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been good if she'd let the tropes go, let the story find itself, and then work the tropes in, or even just recognize that there was this amazing trope. And I can't stress this enough. I think if there had been a friendship love triangle, a platonic female friendship love triangle as the centerpiece of the book, it would have made sense in terms of her trauma and her growth. And she, Brown Sugar is about female solidarity and, avoiding waste men and not attacking each other over men. And so it just makes so much sense. And it's right there. And then Rianne just disappears. And I don't know why that's there, except maybe just to tie it off in a happy ending in the middle of the book. We've sorted that, moving on. But it just feels like an enormously wasted opportunity.
Yeah. Well, okay.
So if a younger reader might really enjoy this, and I know I just started back up again, but I was just thinking I should tie this off as per the genre. I think younger readers would really enjoy this. I think that possibly the current young generation has a different set of preoccupations to my generation.
So diplomatic.
I think they're in a different generation, and I think they might relate to this a little more. But I want to see Babalola stretch out. I think she has the writing ability to do something with the romance genre, and I'd like to see her try and do that next time.
Oh, that's a very nice wrap up there. Okay, well, I'm going to jump into mine and just
thank God.
But I really enjoyed that, Gareth, because clearly you are fresh. When did you finish the book? Because that was a lot of details, and mine's going to be a bit more sparse because I finished this over almost 2 months ago now.
I finished mine yesterday, not because it took me that much longer to read it. I got to it much later in the piece.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, Book Lovers. What's it all about?
By Emily Henry. So I'm going to read a quick synopsis from Goodreads. So our main character, Nora Stephan's life is books. She reads them all, and she is not that type of heroine. Not the plucky one, not the laid-back dream girl, and especially not the sweetheart. In fact, the only people Nora is a heroine for are her clients, for whom she lands enormous deals as a cutthroat literary agent, and her beloved little sister, Libby. Which is why she agrees to go to Sunshine Falls, North Carolina for the month of August, when Libby begs her for a sister's trip away, with visions of a small-town transformation for Nora, who she's convinced needs to become the heroine in her own story. But instead of picnics in meadows or run-ins with a handsome country doctor or bulging four-armed bartender, Nora keeps bumping into Charlie Lastra, a bookish, brooding editor from back in the city. It would be a meet cute if not for the fact that they've met many times and it's never been cute. If Nora knows she's not an ideal heroine, Charlie knows he's nobody's hero. But as they are thrown together again and again, in a series of coincidences no editor worth their salt would allow, what they discover might just unravel the carefully crafted stories they've written about themselves. So that is...
Wow, that sounds really meta. Would that be the word?
The part of the end?
Well, yeah, the editor wouldn't allow for this to happen. It's a book that's kind of aware of its space as a book. Is that right?
Yeah, but Charlie's job is an editor. So I think maybe that's why they've mentioned it. So, yeah, it is aware of itself as a book, and throughout the book, there's a lot of references to other authors and other books. So it's really cool in that regard. There's even a reference to Salman Rushdie, which I really enjoyed, especially after what's happened over there. So as if on cue, the doctor, a balding man with a Salman Rushdie goatee and brow, walks out of the exam room. So that was great.
Nice.
So I loved the start of this book. To me, it was like, yep, I'm on this train. I'm ready to go toot, because what she does, and I want to read it out because I think this prologue is spectacular. And let me know if I'm reading for too long. Can I read so much?
Yeah, go for it. No one's listening.
When books are your life, or hey, how dare you? We have some pretty amazing audience.
We do. I'm sorry.
When books are your life, or in my case, your job, you get pretty good at guessing where a story is going. The tropes, the archetypes, the common plot twists all start to organize themselves into a catalog inside your brain, divided by category and genre. The husband is the killer. The nerd gets a makeover, and without her glasses, she's smoking hot. The guy gets the girl, or the other girl does. Someone explains a complicated scientific concept, and someone else says, in English, please. The details may change from book to book, but there's nothing truly new under the sun. Take, for example, the small town love story. The kind where a cynical hotshot from New York or Los Angeles gets shipped off to small town USA to, like, run a family-owned Christmas tree farm, out of business to make room for a soulless corporation. But while said city person is in town, things don't go to plan. Because, of course, the Christmas tree farm or bakery or whatever the hero's been sent to destroy is owned and operated by someone ridiculously attractive and suitably available for wooing. Back in the city, the lead has a romantic partner, someone ruthless, who encourages him to do what he set out to do and ruins some lives in exchange for the big promotion. He feels calls from her during which she interrupts him, barking heartless advice from the seat of her Peloton bike. You can tell she's evil because her hair is in an unnatural blonde, slicked back a la Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct, and also she hates Christmas decorations. As the hero spends more time with the charming baker, seamstress, tree farm person, things change for him. He learns the true meaning of life. He returns home transformed by the love of a good woman. There he asks his Ice Queen girlfriend to take a walk with him. She gapes, says something like, in these Manolos, which I'm guessing are shoes. It would be fun, he tells her. On the walk, he might ask her to look up at the stars. She snaps, you know I can't look up right now, I just got Botox. And then he realizes he can't go back to his old life. He doesn't want to. He ends his cold, unsatisfying relationship and proposes to his new sweetheart, who needs dating. At this point, you find yourself screaming at the book. You don't even know her. What's her middle name, bitch? From across the room, your sister Libby hushes you, throws popcorn at your head without lifting her gaze from her own crinkly covered library book. And that's why I'm running late to this lunch meeting. Because that's my life, the trope that governs my days, the archetype over which my details are superimposed. I'm the city person, not the one who meets the hot farmer, the other one. The uptight, manicured literary agent reading manuscripts from atop her Peloton, while a serene beach screen saver, oh my gosh, that's wordy, while a serene beach scene screensaver drifts unnoticed across her computer screen. I'm the one who gets dumped. I've read this story and lived it enough to know what's happening again right now as I'm weaving through late afternoon foot traffic in Midtown, my phone clutched to my ear. He hasn't said it yet, but the hairs on the back of my neck are rising, the pit opening in my stomach as he maneuvers the conversation towards a cartoon-style drop off a cliff. Grant was... Okay, anyway, so now it goes into that. So we've set up this amazing scene where our heroine is not the typical heroine. And this goes into a review also on Goodreads. The beginning was reading like a possible 4-star, no hope for a 5, then out of nowhere I was hit with a 5-star feeling. I was sure this would be the best Emily Henry I'd read. And then alas, it petered out pretty quickly. It did the classic romance killer, which is to have the couple get together too soon and fill the last half of the book with plot that has nothing to do with the romance. Okay. So I feel that with this book.
Yeah. I mean, she feels like she's genuinely trying to push out of these tropes, right? Like,
yeah,
she's the working girl. She's Sigourney Weaver, not Melanie Griffiths. I know, why am I referencing 80s movies? But yeah, she's the horrible Manolo vapid girlfriend who doesn't
Botox
really like him,
injected.
but he's just another accessory. And humanizing that character who's not that, obviously. Like, no one's that. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
So what happened?
So what happened was, and again, it's the issue with Kiki in your story. You've set this amazing anti-trope up, if you will. You're trying to escape this pathway. And people see her as this literary agent and she'll do anything for her clients, which does happen. But I wanted her to do something that does entail, because throughout this whole book, she has this internal conflict that no one loves her because she's the shark of a literary agent of the world. Well, in New York. New York is not the world. But she does not do anything that makes me as a reader believe that in any way. So she's just kind of this conflicted girl. So in terms of a character arc, them learning, that does not exist. But there's two elements to this book. There's the romance between our main character and Charlie. And then there's also, and this other side, which I think was amazingly done. Why is Nora like the way she is? Again, humanizing this character that we don't fall in love with in the rom-com. It's the other woman that gets dumped. And it follows along the lines that their mum, spoilers alert everyone as well for this book. So her younger sister and Nora were living in New York and their mum was trying to become an actor. And we all know how difficult, not that I've tried, but I can imagine it'll be very difficult. And she never gets anywhere.
Very hard, yeah.
Yeah. And so the mum dies and the responsibility of keeping their family together and not going into, foster care or something like that. Nora steps up and becomes a working woman and she gets shit done. And so this is the narrative she's written about herself, and she goes out into the world. She becomes a literary agent, but secretly in her heart, she wants to become an editor, but she's just had huge success in this literary agent space. To become an editor, you've got to go to the bottom and start up again. And she just can't do it because she still has this mentality. She has to look after her sister, Libby. Towards the end of the... Oh, you go.
I just wanted to just say to our listeners and viewers, I've met literary agents. They're lovely people. The thing is, they're advocates for writers, and they have a lot of influence on how writers are perceived by publishers. So it is actually a very creative position. It's they usually take a fixed percentage, and that that going in. So then it's not like they're cutthroat with the writers. They don't kind of I'm taking 40%. You have to fight them. It's nothing like that. I think that a literary agent is much higher up the tree than a regular editor. There are sort of the top editors that have quite a bit of power, and they sit almost on the level of publishers, but most editors are just grinding away, fixing people's worst impulses. So in a way, it's like a princess meeting a peasant, that narrative. But I just think it should be said that there's no particular reason for her to be a terrible person as a literary agent. It's not a job requirement. And in many ways, literary agents, they have to be charming. They have to inspire confidence, their judgment, because they go to publishers and say, I found someone, they're great, read this book. If they have poor judgment, the publishers will go, stop wasting my time. So, I just thought I'd mention that because there seems to be an assumption that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Yes. And so prologue, we meet the love interest, Charlie Lastra, who's an editor for a publishing house that she has a manuscript and she wants him to edit it and she wants to get it published by this publishing house. He flat off the bat says, I don't like this manuscript for X reasons. And from this point on, this is the trope. She's fallen into the trope, unfortunately, of, the main characters not liking each other. But to me, this was not a good enough reason for her not to like our love interest, Charlie Lastroff, because he just said, I don't like it for these reasons. And she's like, now you're my professional nemesis.
I mean, he wouldn't have the authority to do that either. Publishers make those decisions. That's quite weird. But all right, yeah. So he's said no.
Mm-hmm.
Are his reasons good? What are his reasons? Do you recall?
Oh, this is professional interest on your end?
A little bit, yeah.
I should just tell you, I found Fielding's new book unreadable. My jaw drops. Next page. He turns his water glass in place. Her best is the glory of small things, he says. Like 3 seconds of eye contact was enough to read my most inner thoughts, and he knows he's speaking for both of us. I say this book is every bit as good. It's just different, less subdued maybe, but that gives it a cinematic edge. Less subdued, Charlie squints. That's like saying Charles Manson was a lifestyle guru. It might be true, but it's hardly the point. This book feels like someone watched that Sarah McLachlan commercial for animal cruelty prevention and thought, but what if all the puppies died on camera? So I think he's talking about the characters don't seem real or they're one dimension, and he doesn't like the place that it's set in. And it is set in Sunshine Falls in North Carolina. And we don't really understand why he doesn't like its setting. And he says that the writer's never been to that place, obviously, because in 2 years later, they end up in Sunshine Falls. And that's actually where he's from originally.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, he's a very strange editor.
He's got all this power and good looks.
Yeah, and I think she's right. He's being a bit of a dick. I mean, as an editor, you don't always love the things you edit. It doesn't always work out that way. But you really do focus on the strengths and try and think, how am I going to navigate the weaknesses? How much time will it take to get this into the shape it needs to be in? If this writer had a success with their previous book, that would be a strong motivation to make it work. And so his absolute reluctance to engage, I can see, I take it personally too as a literary agent. I'd be like, what's this guy's problem? He's behaving oddly.
Okay, but you wouldn't be like, this is my professional nemesis. This is now my professional
nemesis. Not professional nemesis, but I'd be sort of thinking, I'm going to go round this person, go straight to the publisher and say, what are you doing? Or I'd, think that maybe he'd had some sort of nervous breakdown or something. Obviously, a lot of readers probably don't know the ins and outs of the publishing industry, so this probably sits fine. So I will shut up and we will say this is exactly how agents and editors behave. Then what happens?
So then 2 years later, she ends up in Sunshine Falls with her sister, who is pregnant. Sister Libby sees her sister cutthroating as a literary agent, being the shark, and she wants Libby to fall in. No, she wants Nora. Libby, the sister, wants Nora to fall in love with someone like that country. So making Nora the heroine of the story. And they believe the right way to do that is go to this small country town in the middle of nowhere. So they go there and Charlie happens to be there. And she's like, what? My professional nemesis here. What are you doing here? One of the strengths of this book is that the banter between Nora and Charlie is fantastic. Like they've got this really cool, quirky, sassy, actually sassy and enjoyable. Not I'm being a bitch sassy, but, I'm just being sassy. So amazing banter. And kind of what this review says is these characters get together quite early on. There's a first kiss at the door. And then he goes in to say, oh, look, Nora, I'm sorry. And then she takes, so actually the whole book is kind of very Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Like, there's a lot of misunderstandings on Nora's end. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end of the book, it kind of gets wrapped up. But, you know, he was going to say, look, I really like you. Within, like, this was a quarter of the way into the book, but he doesn't get to finish because he says he can't go back to New York and be with her because he's staying there to look after his parents. His mum can't work because she just seems to not have her head screwed on properly. And the dad has had multiple heart attacks. So, the dad was a builder, but they own a small bookstore in Sunshine Falls. And that's why he's decided to stay there and give up his career as an editor and look after his family. And the best part of the book, and this is where not the best part, but when we go away from those tropes, and there's this the trope of the love triangle. There's a few love triangles here. And I feel like I'm going all over the place, but I'll try and tie it up in a pretty bow like you did, Gareth. So the love triangles in terms of that romantic essence, enter Charlie's cousin, who also lives in Sunshine Falls. So she goes on a couple of dates with him because Libby sets them up and it's like, this is perfect small country town boy you're going to fall in love with. Nora kind of amuses her and goes on these dates. But I, as a reader, know this is not a legitimate alternative for Nora because her banter and her relationship with Charlie has already been well established. There's never any second guessing on my part. So I don't know if that was intentional, putting this trope in and letting it kind of peter out. Because, again, I think she is trying to set up that there are tropes and I'm going to go against them. So maybe that's what she was trying to do. And then there's the love triangle on Nora between picking Charlie and her sister, because Nora has this very protective feeling towards her sister and she has to do everything for the sister, which kind of gets resolved in the end. And Libby's like, you need to let me live my own life, and etc. So there's that love triangle like there. Who does Nora choose between the sister and that family relationship, which is really strong, or Charlie? Because that does come up. Mm-hmm. In the end, there's another element in there because Nora actually chooses to go back to New York and pursue her career, leaving Charlie and Libby in Sunshine Falls. And I wish the book had ended there because the character arc of Nora is letting especially her sister, living her life to make sure her sister is fine, her clients are fine, and everyone else is fine, not looking after her own needs. But her going to New York without any of them would have been her growing as that main character. But then, obviously, for the ending of a romance, Charlie comes back and is like, look, I'm here, let's be together. That's kind of the final chapter.
So he does go back to New York?
Yes, he does.
And he leaves his parents?
So, because Libby moved to Sunshine Falls, she's decided to now take over the bookstore and look after the parents so he can go be with Nora.
Okay, so that's a very romantic thing for her to do.
Mm-hmm.
But
I love your
is she really going to have her own life as the carer for somebody else's elderly parents? It seems like not a great outcome for Libby.
Yeah. But the best developed characters are Charlie and Nora. Libby is the catalyst, or this kind of one-dimensional character there to present this conflict for Nora. She's presented as this happy, kind, bubbly person, and I suppose she's put there as the sacrificial pawn because Nora sacrificed everything her whole life for Libby. Now it's Libby's turn to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, how would you have done it? So you would have just had Nora go back?
Yes, because, again, we're rubbing up against those romance tropes, but in real life, people do make those decisions, and I think they are romantic in a way as well. It's like we had something as special here, the timing is not right, it's not going to happen. But what we had in Sunshine Falls was amazing. But it's not, the romance genre.
It really does present a problem, though. I can see how this would have been difficult. I mean, another way that it could have gone, surely, is that in understanding, I've forgotten the guy's name already.
Charlie.
In understanding Charlie's decisions, maybe Nora could have realized that in actual fact, she works really hard apparently for her sister's sake, wants to be an editor. Staying with Charlie and understanding his priorities, she could have made, in a sense, what she deems a selfish decision by staying with them as well, becoming an editor. You can be an editor from afar. It's harder to be a literary agent from afar. But it seems like that would have potentially resolved the issue. What I see in Libby is that she'd probably make a very good literary agent. In sort of, getting people together and negotiating these things and advocating for her client, Sister Nora. I think that would have been a very entertaining ending if Libby had gone off. Because there's nothing, like, Libby is just young, right? Like, Nora's looking after her. Was there
they're a couple of years younger. No, Libby is married and has kids, whereas Nora is single.
Okay. Well, yeah, okay. So that would complicate matters. Although, maybe one of those great New York schools, and yeah, I don't know. But I feel like something like that.
I should probably say that it's presented that Libby takes Nora to Sunshine Falls to find love for her, but Libby wanted Nora to experience Sunshine Falls because her husband, Libby's husband, is got a job in Sunshine Falls now, so they're planning on moving, and she wanted Nora to taste Sunshine Falls so she could potentially move there too and give up her life in New York as a literary agent and move to Sunshine Falls.
Libby sounds devious. Like she's just, like, I need Nora with me, so I'm gonna. Because honestly, I mean, you want your sister whose love life is not great. You take her to a small town, a limited pool of people. It doesn't seem necessarily like her motives are entirely pure. It feels like she's just keeping her sister with her. That's interesting, actually. Yeah, I don't know. So
yeah, so in the end,
you read it.
I read it. Another strength was this was an easy book to read, very easy. I went through it in about 3-4 days, and that is a testament to Emily Henry. She is clearly an experienced romance author because she has a lot of other books. And again, I wanted her, she almost did it. She had it set up to push the envelope on what it means to write a romance book. But there was just a few spots that just let it down. There was a few things, like you said, in terms of the editor, literary agent, just slightly unbelievable stuff that takes you away from the story. And I want the same issue. I want these authors, they're fantastic writers, just to push the envelope on what it means to pick up a romance and enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in fairness to both writers, if you're being a rom-com and not a rom-dram, romantic drama, is that a thing, rom-dram? I felt like I coined it, but it sounded terrible. And then I thought somebody else has probably already thought of it. If she'd gone off on her own in terms of a romance structure where we want the characters to get together, that would potentially be a downbeat ending. Very hard to get around that, particularly if Charlie would like to be with her, but he is obligated to stay. Apparently he isn't. I think that really is a complication, and I don't agree that her just going back to New York and going, I'm doing this for me. I mean, that's a great ending, but is it a great romance book ending? I don't know.
Obviously not.
Yeah, and that seems to be the thing that romance writers are going to have to come to grips with. How do you navigate like agency and growth in a character, whilst maintaining what is a very traditional sort of series of expectations and tropes. It's a fascinating question, actually, and someone's going to do it. Someone's going to break the mold, because it is a very rigid genre, probably the most rigid of the genres. Yeah, I mean, maybe it'll be you, Shannon. Maybe you'll adopt a secret identity as a romance writer and crack out a truly revolutionary romance novel.
Yeah, well, our pen name is Elise Shaw. Alice Shaw.
It is. Mm-hmm. Yes, we are in that competition. Will we win it? I don't think we will. But
I don't think we will.
No. Hopefully, they'll kind of look at it and go, yeah, it's not bad. I'd be happy with that.
Well, we're going to get feedback, so that will be interesting.
By others. It will be interesting.
Yeah. What was I going to say?
So how many stars?
I was just about to get to that. So 3.5 stars, I think.
3.5.
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting, because, I thought you were going to go lower. And it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, to flip around. I'm not going to do it, because I'm almost romanced out, I feel. But if I read Book Lovers and you read Honey and Spice, and just to see whether we would, having done a review already in one way, what our responses would be. Because it would be a pressured situation in some ways. But I want to avoid those. We've done a first kiss. We've written a sex scene. I feel like I've been under a lot of pressure. Have you noticed the grey? It's getting worse.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to move into other topics like censorship. That should be fun and safe. Just things like that. Because what have we got coming up?
We are going to be talking about censorship. So we have very strong opinions on Roald Dahl's new editions of his book that I think we're going to be talking about. And also, did you want to mention our next book that we're going to be reviewing, Gareth?
Yes, it was an exclusive. This information was an exclusive for one of our viewers.
Jay.
Hello to them. Jay, God, your memory's good. As soon as I need to remember a name, it just flitters out of my head. It's very annoying. Lucky you're here. Yes, Jay, that was an exclusive for Jay. But now we're revealing it, which is we're going to do Under the Skin by Michael Faber. Under the Skin is a science fiction novel, although I think that's a very loose sort of categorization. I would put it more in the vein of general fiction with just some sci-fi elements. This was made into a movie with also forgetting her name, Scarlett Johansson. And we might talk about the movie as well, because the movie is a fascinating take on the book in terms of trying to, in a sense, capture the texture of the book. It's a film that I think, we'll find out if I'm right about this, but I think it's a film that is very aware of the book. It isn't just like a great story, we'll do our own take on it. I think it's a conversation, a dialogue with the book.
Yeah.
So that should be a lot of fun. Very different, quite dark. Brooding, and it should be really great.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it. And finally, we've ended the romance topic, and I'm looking forward to jumping into other things. Yay!
Yeah, so am I. It's been great being in romance, but it's also great leaving. And we'll see you all next week
on The Pleasure of the Text.